Zimbabwe's warrior spirit, a celebration for the man who led a guerrilla army to liberation from white oppression. But after 2 decades in power, President Mugabe's leadership is far from secure. A new opposition is gathering strength, demanding change and an end to Mugabe's rule. The president's response? To play the race card, backing a wave of invasions of white-owned farms.
Those farmers who are planning violence, please listen to this message. We can unleash greater violence than they.
On the streets of the capital, Harare, increasing anger and anarchy as elections approach.
We are prepared to go for war.
For 20 years, Robert Mugabe has ruled Zimbabwe virtually unchallenged. His party, ZANU-PF, holds 147 out of 150 seats in Parliament, a majority that's bred complacency and greed. But his grip may finally be slipping. Mugabe's allies have grown rich at the expense of the poor. Corruption and economic mismanagement have pushed Zimbabwe to the brink of financial collapse. A new political party threatens to undermine his power.
The man has run around amok without any checks and balances. So Parliament became irrelevant, the people became marginalized, and the man ruled like a king.
You know, he was a person who had feel for the nation, and he was he was fatherly, he would listen to everybody. But, you know, there's been a sudden U-turn, a sudden change from building Zimbabwe to destroying Zimbabwe.
As elections loom, Mr Mugabe's trying to shore up his party's fortunes, turning, as many politicians do, to old enemies.
We cannot continue to exist here, to live as if we are an extension of the British Empire or an extension of Britain or England. We are Zimbabweans, fully independent. We get our instructions not from London, not from Downing Street, directly from our people and from nobody else.
Whipping up racial resentment over land ownership, Mr Mugabe has encouraged landless peasants and former liberation fighters to march onto white-owned farms.
There is enough land in the country, and out of 12 million hectares, what we want about half of that, 5 million plus, and they only 4,000 farmers own 12 million hectares of the most fertile land in the country. Why can't they agree to 5 million plus coming our way?
The President denies he's instructed the war veterans to act, but has done nothing to enforce court rulings that say the occupations are illegal. Across Zimbabwe, up to 900 farms have now been invaded by ZANU-PF supporters. This group has set up camp within sight of Rory Hensman's homestead.
That's a very real threat when you've got someone standing there saying, chap, you're on the next boat to England. You can't take it with a pinch of salt.
Well, I didn't actually intimidated him, but I told him that we have come to occupy your farm. Maybe somebody can say it's intimidating, but I was telling him that we are here now to occupy the farm.
I was born here. I've lived here all my life. I've never had any intention of going anywhere else, and I still don't. I've sunk my life into this farm. I love it. I've got people working for me here who worked for my father. We've got a number of chaps here who've been here Whoa, well over 50 years now.
Rory Hensman's father bought this 3,000-acre farm in 1942. Over the years, as well as grazing cattle, he's planted soya, tobacco and seed crops. With more than 400 workers, it's a lifestyle he simply couldn't have anywhere else.
They've driven all our forefathers from this land, so now I don't think they belong here. But if he wants to stay with us, there's that room for him to do so, because he's a citizen by birth. We can even give him 30 hectares that everybody's going to get, or 90 hectares, whatever.
I don't believe it's a question of land at all. There's plenty of land available. They all know that. Everyone knows that. It's a political gimmick by ZANU-PF to intimidate the farmer and the local population.
Intimidate them to do what?
To vote for ZANU-PF.
Despite the poverty of Zimbabwe's rural heartland, the government-backed land grab is not endorsed by all. Here in the town of Bindura, thousands of farm workers, fearful of losing their jobs, have come to hear the leader of the Movement for Democratic Change, Morgan Tsvangirai. Tsvangirai is a popular trade union leader whose opposition party is polling strongly ahead of the general election. He condemns farm invasions, saying land redistribution must be lawful, with proper compensation for those who choose to leave.
But in an orderly and transparent and equitable manner.
The government, that is ZANU-PF, has failed to have fundamental land reform for the last 20 years. It has always been ad hoc. No long-term planning for that land reform. Some of the land stock that is in the government hands has ended up within senior government officials and ministers. The people who need the land have been totally excluded.
If you were Prime Minister, how would you deal with the farm occupations? Would you have those people evicted?
Of course. But we will engage to them and say, look, if you want land, you go to the people who are being registered and being trained for farm resettlement. You cannot be allowed to run around the country like outlaws, violating and deliberately breaking the law. Cannot accept that.
Tsvangirai peppers his rallies with calls for transparency, accountability and an end to corruption, regularly calling for Mugabe's arrest.
He's making, of course, political statements. And if I were to be arrested in corruption, you would have to say, wow, what corruption there has been. I don't want to say I'm an honest man, but I leave the people to judge me.
You say at every rally Mugabe should be arrested, and in fact the other night you just said arrest the bugger. On what specific grounds do you have to justify that statement?
Well, first of all, I think that will have to be from the facts that are on there, on human rights abuses, on break of the law, when he has taken oath to uphold the law, on threatening opponents with death, on corruption. And I think there's so much evidence on corruption, back deals, externalization of resources from this country. There's so much.
The MDC, promoting itself as a party for all Zimbabweans, has already chalked up one significant victory over Mugabe. In February, together with other opposition groups, it defeated a referendum proposal which would have allowed the government to seize white-owned farms without compensation. The result was a defining moment for businessman Bill Searle, one of a wave of white Zimbabweans who are now putting their votes and their money behind MDC.
I realise that there's a chance of a very real change in this country. I believe the racism that we thought, a lot of us whites thought existed, actually doesn't exist any longer. It's purely in the minds of the ZANU-PF people. They want it to be there. I've decided then to throw my weight entirely in and help these people win this next election. I believe it can be done.
But supporting the opposition brings with it threats of recrimination.
If it means that all of us are going to die, MDC is never, and I'm saying never, going to rule this country.
Douglas Mahia is a leader of the war veterans in Harare. Loyal to the president, he's been organising farm occupations and threatening violence if anyone tries to stop him, especially the MDC.
We'll continue fighting until we have the land. Whoever is stopping us from the land will fight. We will use all methods to ensure that we have the land, because it is the same struggle that is continuing. In other words, the struggle continues.
Conflict has already spilled onto the streets of Harare as an opposition march turned violent. Before the protest began, authorities tried to block it, even though the marchers had a court order and official permission to go ahead. When they finally started walking, the crowd of a few hundred grew to thousands. It was too much for Mugabe's loyalists. From ZANU-PF headquarters, men armed with whips, clubs and branches ambushed the protesters. Whites were singled out and brutally bashed.
I got beaten up by the so-called ZANU-PF guys. They were nothing but a set of hooligans and thugs.
Scores of others, black and white, were clubbed, kicked and beaten.
We are really disappointed. This country belongs to 12 million people, not 50,000 war veterans. This is our country. If Mugabe's time to go comes, he will definitely go. We'll make him go. If he wants a war, we'll leave our offices and go to war.
Yes. The public knows what's wrong and right. Mugabe is no longer wanted by the people. The people want a new leader.
20 years ago, President Mugabe led his nation from white rule to independence. Here at Heroes Acre, tribute is paid to those who gave their lives for the struggle. But even one who fought with Mugabe against the forces of Ian Smith now says he's lost his way. Margaret Dongo, a former freedom fighter, says she went to war for democracy. Today she accuses Mugabe of using the same methods as his white oppressors.
I was fighting the system. And this is why you find me standing up again against Robert Mugabe, because it is the system that I believe in. It's a question of principle. Mugabe is doing the same thing, is even much more worse than Smith, and that's why I'm standing up to remind him, to say that's what we were fighting against, and you don't have to repeat it yourself.
Her outspokenness led to her expulsion from ZANU. She's now one of only 3 opposition members of parliament. But in the past she was close to Mugabe, and especially his first wife Sally, who encouraged her to go into politics.
Yeah, it's a pity that we lost that woman. She was quite a strong character, and I want to believe that she was Mother Zimbabwe, and she was sort of a character who would try to bring all races, colour, whatever it is, together. After she died, the president's life changed suddenly, and his behavior. And I want to believe that that's where things started changing. That's where he even lost his feeling for the people, and his focus was diverted.
In 1996, President Mugabe married for a second time to a woman 40 years his junior. While Sally was an active political campaigner, Grace Mugabe is better known for her dedication to shopping. The president seems to be slipping away from his earlier ideals, constantly blaming Britain for his nation's woes, with erratic outbursts against the Blair government, whom he describes as gay gangsters.
But of course we know that that government has lots of people who are psychiatric cases, depraved homosexuals who think a man can be a woman. In Tony Blair's government, there are homosexuals who are given to that kind of life. They believe in it. They want us to accept it. We have said, no, we won't accept it here.
The president is increasingly isolated. Among the people, there's a growing sense of disappointment.
They fought in the liberation struggle thinking that their future was going to be a better future. But today there's no better future. See, it's like everyone is suffering in this country.
Thomas Mapfumo, the Lion of Zimbabwe, once made music about liberation. Today he sings songs of corruption, which ZANU is trying to ban from national airwaves. With his finger on the popular pulse, he says the message to Mugabe is that it's time to go.
People don't want, the president anymore. They think he had, stayed a long time, and they've actually had enough of his ruling party, the ZANU-PF. And so they are looking for a change. And when they say they want some change, that means they want a new leader.
For Zimbabwe's white farmers, there's been a huge shock as their vast land holdings were made the focus of political rage. And their fears have been exacerbated by Parliament's recent decision to overturn the results of February's referendum. Ignoring the people's no vote, the ZANU-dominated chamber has passed a bill allowing the government to seize farms without compensation. But it's the poor who've not received the land they were promised at independence and who felt the worst effects of cronyism and bad economic management.
Myself, I'm a widow. I have 5 children, no land, staying with my father-in-law, with his family, a family of 7. So where am I going to get the land?
By just giving every Tom, Dick and Harry a hunk of land is not going to solve that problem.
Rory Hensman still expects to get $1 million for his tobacco crop this year, while his workers are paid just $50 a month. After this bitter election campaign, neither would expect much more from President Mugabe.